I have myself on mute, didn't I? How many of you guys could see me doing all my crazy things while the timer was going on? Nobody? Okay, awesome. I was trying to set up my light and everything. Anyway, just ignore me. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Bridging the Gap. I am your host, Kelly, and we have an awesome panel this evening. I would like to go through and introduce them, and then I also like to give the panelists a chance to introduce themselves. And you can mention your credentials, you can mention your nationality, your culture, your race, whatever you'd like to mention, also your handles, whatever you would like to share and you're comfortable with. And then I will start out with the icebreaker. So I have Nelson, I have Coach K, Lady Mogulette, uh, Leilani Atanga. I have Fatima. Or what do you have? F Khan? That sounds like.
Oh yeah, yeah. Should I change it? I just changed it. Hold on, let me change it.
I mean, I can call you F Khan. It sounds like
No,
you're about to start like a war. Like
no,
Genghis
no.
Khan.
Okay, there we go.
Okay. Fatima. And then I have Fee. But if you can go ahead and introduce yourselves, your credentials, to let everyone know who you are that's watching.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gary Nelson. I'm a nationally certified counselor and a licensed professional counselor. I run private practice where I help out both youth and adults with various mental health issues. And I also run different support service programs inside of various schools for the same to provide individual, family, and group counseling for students and families that need it.
Excellent. Thank you. Coach K, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Kelly. I am Katie. I am a certified life coach. I have a background in social work, and I work with teens and young adults and help them manage to deal with their stress and their anxiety and to create a future they can feel excited about. You can reach me on my website, www.coachkr.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Coach K. Lady Nogulette, please take it away.
Hi guys, I'm Lady T. I mentor young people, like young girls specifically in the foster care system, that are young parents, and I do so through via TOBB Future Inc., which is turning obstacles into building blocks, which provides them with resources and just workshops to help them to just navigate through tough situations in life. And I'm also a philanthropist, I work in philanthropy. My handle is at Lady Mogulette. So, hi everyone.
Welcome. Thank you for that. Leilani, is it doctor yet?
Almost.
Yes. Well, feel free to introduce yourself and you can give your credentials as well.
Yes. My name is Leilani Del Campo, and I am a certified holistic health practitioner. I should be taking my board exam for my ND this month, praise God. But I have worked in the counseling, social work, and art therapy field for over 20 years. My husband and I own a salon spa, but we are building into wellness center. But I've worked as a clinical social worker and art therapist for battered women's shelters, psychiatric hospitals, and behavioral health centers, school settings with psychologists, residential centers, church settings, mental health facilities, and correction centers where couples have, through domestic court system, have tried to kill each other. It's like doing psychoeducational groups and mentoring. I being raised around domestic violence and always wanted to know why people would abuse others, has actually led me to go into the counseling field, as well as people who have hair problems and want to open up their life in my chair. So, also a licensed cosmetologist, and so we are always around people, and I always have been curious about why people want to do things to each other, for each other, through each other, and so went into holistic health practicing because I saw, after working in all these settings, there's a root cause to why people respond the way they do, and so that is been my background with a nutshell.
Very extensive background. She's like, help people all over the world in every setting. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. We appreciate you being here. Fatima, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Fatima. I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, mom of two, originally from Chicago, parents of South Asian descent, so like India and Pakistan area. And I'm a writer by profession. Background is in healthcare administration, but I have a writing business, and I help just graduate level or medical students, kind of go to their next step in life. And so just helping them out with their documents and things like that. So yeah, happy to be here. Happy to talk about this discussion.
Thank you so much. This discussion was actually Fatima's idea. She's like, I want to talk about this. And I was like, that would be a great topic. I don't know who's going to want to do it. Let's see. Because it can be a touchy subject. So
yes,
I hope we do it well. I hope we do it justice this evening. Fee, feel free. And Saeed, I'll come to you last.
Hello, everyone. My name is Faria Robinson. You can call me Fee. I'm from Bangladesh. I was born there, but I had moved to Canada about 22 years ago, and I never went back. Unfortunately, I'm not proud of that. But I'm a mom of one beautiful girl. I'm an engineer, so it took me a little while to do it, but I finished it recently, about 3 years ago. And I was working on that, yeah. And then, and I also have a skincare line that I just started, and portions of the proceedings goes towards Daily Bread in Toronto. So they try to reach out around the community as much as they can. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing at the moment. So I'm pretty happy. I'm in peace. I went through some humps along the way, but we'll talk about that. But thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. And Saida, and last but not least, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Can you hear me okay? Am I breaking up? No. All right. Sorry. I was having issues with my internet. So my name is Saida. I'm from El Salvador, born, raised, and located in El Salvador. I own a tourist business, a tour operator business in El Salvador. By profession, I am a teacher, and I've done training. I work with human resources development. So, I've done coaching a lot, and I'm a mother of a 10-year-old daughter, and I was actually a victim of domestic violence. Survival. Now.
Well, thank you so much for coming. I do have one more person coming a little bit later. She had a game, so she'll be joining. And I had another friend I invited, but it was hard for her to discuss it, but she gave me permission to talk about some of her stories, because it was a brutal situation. So she said I could use her stories, and she's watching. So I gave her, she gave me permission to do that. So I do, it sounds like we have an excellent panel this evening. So thank you everyone for showing up. I usually start it with an icebreaker. But because we have people who have had experience with it, I myself have been in an abusive relationship. So for those of you who didn't know, I know some people do know. So I know it can be tough to talk about, but I also would like to ask the chat if people are watching to show grace, because it is not an easy conversation to have. A lot of people who are in it don't want to talk about it. So if you're brave enough to have the conversation, it should be respected. So that's one. And usually I start with an icebreaker question, but because it's I have a lot of questions and they can go deep, I don't want to really waste time with an icebreaker. I do want to give people a chance, if you want to share your experience, if you want to take a few minutes, whatever you're comfortable sharing. There's no pressure there. My goal tonight is to kind of shed light on the fact that it happens a lot more often than people are aware of. And it happens to different people, no matter your background. So I want to have the conversation and let people know, like, this is a real thing that people experience on a day-to-day basis. So whoever would like to discuss for the icebreaker your particular experience, you're more than welcome to. If not, we can hop into the first question.
I would like to say something before. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of people have this word abuse as immediately thinking of hitting or whooping or punching. And, there is a different type of abuse, like verbal abuse, emotional, psychological abuse. And I think the last part of the abuse is the physical. That's when it gets to that part. So, and nowadays it's like you as a woman cannot even mention you've been abused because, oh, you probably provoked that or something like that. And it's immediately thinking that it has to do something with a physical abuse when it's not necessarily, all the way to that point. And it doesn't have to get to that point. You don't have to say, hey, stop until it gets to that point. So I just wanted to make sure that people understand that there's different type of abuse and none of them, it's okay.
I agree.
I completely
Absolutely.
get that.
I think it leads on to it. Like Sayeda said, like it's a lot of love bombing, right? Like they hit you with all the love and it comes from nowhere. You think it's a fairy tale until like you're hooked, and then until you're getting comfortable with that person, right? Because they'll at that point it hits you like a brick, like a ton of bricks. You don't even know what to do. You don't know where to go. You have built so much. You have invested so much emotions to them, in them, and yeah, no, I think I wouldn't get into too much details with my stuff. It was just um, I think it happened when I was pregnant. So I had to I was like blaming myself because I felt like, oh, I'm hormonal. Maybe I'm the problem. A lot of times I used to blame myself. So it took me a while to accept it. And there was a lot of gaslighting going on as well. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
That does happen. I know for me, mine didn't happen, and because he was such a fun, enjoyable person. Like nobody, not even his friends, knew that he was that type of person. They thought I was lying. They were like, he would never do anything like that. That's not his personality. But sometimes they're a different person with you than they are with everyone else. So a lot of times people don't even see that side to them. And I know mine, he didn't start being physically abusive until we got engaged. And it was like, now you're my property. So it was almost like this, you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything. What are you doing? If you leave without my permission, there's going to be consequences, that type of thing. But before we were boyfriend and girlfriend, it was fine, chill. But when he felt like he owned me, that's when like he changed. So it happens in phases. It's not always like, hey, let's get married. Boom. It's like gradually. And then it does start usually verbal. So, but yeah.
Verbal, psychological, emotional. They hit you sometimes with they're charmers a lot of times. No one expects it. The alienation, like, keeping you away from your friends and family, being controlling, saying little things that like to intimidate you or make you feel like no one else will ever desire you if you leave. And then when you do actually try to leave, I dealt with him actually telling me on 2 separate occasions, both of them. One said they were going to effing destroy me, the whole trying to sabotage your career moves, sending emails out to contacts. And one even, try to ruin your reputation, doing things like, making you seem undesirable. Like those are all little things that they do. Like if I can't marry you, no one else is going to marry you type of thing. So those are all like, yeah, different kinds of things. And sometimes the emotional, not at all saying that one is worse or worse than the other, but sometimes the emotional abuse, like the effects of that last a lot longer and take a lot more work to get through. So I'm happy we're having this conversation because a lot of people just aren't aware, and don't even have the resources or just like the capacity to deal with it. And I think a lot of time in this day and age, when people do speak on it, there's very much like a whole attitude of victim blaming. Like Saida said earlier, like, what did you do to deserve it? What did you do to provoke it? Or they'll look at you and say, oh, I've seen some vicious, nasty things. Like, oh, you look at how she acts. You could tell she deserved that.
Minimize your situation, like minimize the abuse all the time. Like,
yeah.
oh, it's just a slap. It's just a choke. I just choked you. But did you get a bruise? Did you have any black eyes?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I think she was in my brain. Everything that she said, I went through probably in the same order. It's unbelievable because it's like we live the same thing. Crazy.
I wanted to say, like, I think everyone's talking about partners, which is the first thing that comes to mind, but I experienced with a parent, so that's really, really tough. I mean, like right now, I've dealt with a lot of it. I've, seek, therapy, talked to a lot of people. And so, but now it's just bringing up all those emotions, and it's really, really hard right now. But like they say that dads, they give their daughters, they're the ones that give self-esteem to their daughters. Has anyone heard that? So
I heard that the other day.
And so it's really, really hard when you're, criticized about your physical appearance or your career choices or just all these small things. And it wasn't physical with me, but it was all the other kinds. And, with my mom and him, like, that was a whole different thing. But like all of us, all my siblings, and it's 7 of us, we all experience different things. And, it's a lot. So, we're all unpacking it, especially when you become a mom. Now you're like, oh my God, you don't want to repeat the cycle. So it's like a lot that you're like forced to deal with. If you're not a mom, you can take your time. But when it's like confronted, because you're like, wait, I think I'm repeating some behaviors, or I see, like, and so you have to make a choice. Are you going to follow in the footsteps, or are you going to make that active choice of like seeking to find a different way than what was used to?
Sorry, I'm sorry to cut you off because I'm like really.
Oh, you're good. Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, that's so on point because we have South Asian parents. So in my family, the fights are very normal. Like the way they fight, it was unhealthy, and I noticed it, and it was like coming on to us. If my mom was upset, she'll like beat on me, and I noticed that, right? And now, like when I see my daughter being around that, I said no, immediately no. Like I'm like, wow, I was seeing that I was like repeating the patterns of my mom, and I have to be like, whoa, what am I doing? So yeah.
Oh, me too, honestly, in the beginning, like, well, not repeat, but yeah, some things, when I'd get angry, like my hand would go up, then I'm like, what am I, so a lot of things I would yell loudly, and it's an active effort where I, started like noticing my behaviors and then working on it. And I'm such a better mom now. And like, it's a whole thing, you know what I mean? And it takes active effort because it's so much easier to just do what you've seen.
I went to mindful parenting class, like, because I was going through so much after the divorce. I was like, oh my God, like I can't even take care of myself right now. Like I have to take care of a kid. So it was like a big thing. And I had to take some courses. And I went to therapy. I had to go to, there's a place called CAMH. And I was referred to by my family doctor. So, like I had help. There's resources out there for us. And I realized that I'm like, I'm in such a better place. But at that point, when I was leaving, it was just so scary. Everything just looked dark. And I was like, where am I going? Like, where am I going to stay? What am I going to do? But it didn't matter because I was just so done with the situation. I'm like, you know what? It doesn't matter. As long as me and my daughter, it's just me and her. And like we're positive. Doesn't matter.
What's crazy is I don't think we take into consideration the fact that a lot of times when we do speak about domestic abuse, I'm happy that you said that, Fatima, because like I don't think people take that into consideration. Like a lot of us grew up, I'm Caribbean, I'm a first generation Jamaican. So like we grow up in a household where like you spare the rod, you spoil the child. Like, so certain things are not considered abusive because it's like, this is what you grew up in. And in a way, you don't realize that you're like kind of normalizing abusive behavior in certain things. Like where when you go into a relationship now, your dysfunction is like a norm. Like you don't notice it right away because it's like, that's kind of how you grew up. Like you kind of seek out the things that you're familiar with, not realizing that until you actually like sit with yourself after, getting certain, having to deal with certain relationships over time. So I'm happy you brought that up too.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by that, Lady Mogul? Like, if you get like spanked by a parent, like, okay, you did you did something wrong, now you're disciplined for it. So that does that make it okay in your mind? Like, okay, I did something wrong and my partner is disciplining me for it. Like, is it like that type of
So in a way, I think that like certain things and certain ways that we're like as adults, unhealed like childhood wounds show up in so many different ways in our relationship, right? So like if for example you're in a household where maybe every time you went to go express yourself, like I remember my mom, they used to call me cry cry, and it got to the point where as I got older, like even now I don't really get that emotional. Like I feel like I don't really like,
you're not allowed to.
not even that I'm not allowed to now. I just don't feel like the need to wallow in self-pity. And maybe this is it feels like it's a wallowing in self-pity. It feels like, like I have times when I'm emotionally constipated where like I had 3 deaths in my family last year, back to back to back. And like I didn't take the time to like sit and grieve. And sometimes it's like, holy shit, like I'll be here and like out of nowhere, I'll feel like this burst of emotion. And I'm like, where is this coming from? But now I know to just let it pass and let it be and feel my feelings. And I'm okay with that now. But there was a time when it was just like, crying or expressing yourself, even as a woman, is kind of weak because it's like nobody cares. You know what I mean? So that's what I meant. Like,
it's like what is expected of you. They expect you to cry, and they think that, oh, she's just a woman, so she's just crying. It's like, but you're feeling the emotions, right? So just normalize a lot of time.
in a way, but yeah, that too. But no, for us, it's like, I don't know. With Caribbean women, we're expected to be strong. we weigh the weight of the world on our shoulders and make it look good. Like take it all in stride. Keep it pushing. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's no time. You have stuff to do. You have a family to take care of. You have people around you to take care of, and sometimes that means you're suppressing your feelings, even in relationships where it's like, I don't want to argue and it's probably not safe to express myself. So, it makes you kind of not speak to things that you would typically speak to. And when you do speak to them, sometimes you kind of cower away because it's just like, I don't want to step on anyone's toes. I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable by expressing myself. So,
I think what's great is how everyone is sharing all their various perspectives of what their experience of abuse has been, whether you've observed it or experienced it. And I love how you were just sharing a cultural perspective, but then there's still like this connection with what's normal, not normal. And I think it's hard sometimes for people to discern when they have brokenness and unhealed wounds, and you have generational family systems that they don't know what it means to have their feelings validated. So then, they don't feel safe to be themselves because a lot of times, it's funny. I printed this out because I thought this is something that I used a lot at the shelters, and maybe you guys have ever seen it, but it says power and control, and then there's violence. But what when I was growing up and trying to understand abuse, my parents, they were yelling, and they were Filipino, so uh, they culturally, there's a passion there. So I think in culture there's tendencies that can be healthy and good in the culture, and then there's that fine line where you're trying to discern, like, is this right? This doesn't feel right. If I'm seeing my dad and my mom, hit each other, and then here I am being a peacemaker, I'm starting to fall into an adult mindset for them, a parent. Then there's this dysfunction of displaced needs, and there's all these bad cycles that start, and they can't figure out what is healthy and not healthy. and then they have to go to therapy or talk it through. But what I have seen, and I'll go back to this cycle because I think it's a good cycle visual, but it says power and control is,
I think I've seen that before.
it's really good. We had used that a lot. I mean, all these things, but I've just seen where it's all rooted in fear, because it's fear of whether they're losing someone or they didn't, it's not what they wanted and they're losing what they want, or person or thing, whatever. And they're totally out of control. And there's usually a connection with like low self-esteem. Uh, and so, for example, when I was growing up, I was always the peacemaker person in the family, trying to split up the fights. And I don't know, some of you might have had it, or maybe even being the one that's being abused. And then
To this day, I can tell you, like my dad's 70, my mom's in her 60s, and they call me. My mom called me to complain about my dad. Like they're literally, I'm like, now I'm just like, I'm 30 years old. Like, please just leave me alone. Like sometimes I don't even want to hear it. I don't want to hear from him. It's just too much, It really is bearing on the children. They don't realize it.
Same.
Yeah. I think what happens is if there's been a learned pattern or programming, I think you're mentioning, I was writing notes about how they normalize the abuse, but a lot of times they don't even know what is abuse too. So like your parents might be thinking, well, you're the more stable one and you've listened to the problems, and instead of going to a therapist or an adult or somebody, they've used to venting out to you. And so over time they think it works, and so they're getting that need met, and it becomes a displaced need that really shouldn't be. And then when which I commend you for, standing up to things, where you're saying, okay, no, I can't. I think there's a boundary. There's boundaries. Usually, abuse is there's no there's it's out of order because it's you have someone's getting hurt or causing harm, and a lot of times when those boundaries are not defined, it just people start getting hurt, and the lines get blurred of who they are. And so whenever like when my mom would always vent out to me, and she was a great woman. They're both with the Lord right now. And but I remember, because I love listening to people, and she was also a counselor. My mother was a counselor too. And so I were both counselors, and by nature. And she would just bash my dad and put him down, and and then use guilt. But anyway, but she had to go through therapy. I had to get counseling for her, and she had to get counseling. And so when we both got it, we all kept trying to put the boundaries down. And I think that's and then she was praying a lot for breakthrough. So, God did this thing, with my family. But I think with everyone, that it has to stop somewhere with somebody. And what I realize is that when one person is putting a boundary down, it helps stop that cycle. It helps stop enabling and the codependency. A lot of times there's all these codependency things going on, and it can be scary for the abuser, because a lot of times they've already out of control. And so the only way they've learned how to be in control is like if somebody mentioned about being charming and being kind, and the way that they want to compliment or give gestures of love. And so it's like that bait or hook, where they'll use that, maybe the manipulation, the guilt, the threats, all those things. And if they can find in people, put them in a position of fear so that they can treat them like they own them, because Shana, you mentioned about the property, when they start doing these, making excuses, and even, oh, I'll change or whatever, or even say sorry, and a lot of times it's just a repeated pattern, that it ends up being out of place. So I just, but I realized that there was a therapist that really had a good model we used, and he was a social worker, and he said, if people just focused a lot on, perfect love casts out fear. If an abuser, someone who's controlling and manipulating, when they can get in touch with their fears and they know how to manage those fears, but not use their fears in a way that it turns into abuse, because really that root, then if they can, like, for example, if they feel loved, and they feel like their needs are put in their, being met in the right place, then a lot of times they have some healthy boundaries and things like that. And then they have to go to therapists like us, like, where they never learned it. Like, there's some people that had to learn a new way and they didn't know. Yeah, it's funny. I like this. And I used to have art professors at school. They would ask us as therapists, they'd say, do you know why people go to therapy? And we say, why? And someone would say, well, because they're crazy. These people are crazy, that's why they go to therapy. They're psychos. And this professor said to me, no, it's people go to therapy because to change something. And so what I noticed is that the abuse cycle stops. A lot of the dysfunction stops when someone takes a stand to work towards wholeness, and they're dealing with their needs and their emotions, and they're working through them so that they can change that pattern.
So thank you so much for that. I'm glad you went there, because that kind of segues into my first question. I wanted to talk about, there are different types of abuse and abusers. I know that they could be narcissists, sociopaths, bipolar. It could be physical, mental, verbal, financial abuse even. So my question is, how do abusers operate? Like, what are signs that you can look for? Or is it just going to hit you like a ton of bricks one day and you'll never see it coming?
I think it like sneaks in, just like seeps through very slowly, more like a like cotton cheese cloth.
And after Fee, I want to go to Nelson, because I don't think.
Oh yes.
Oh,
I do apologize. Do you want to go?
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. After you, I'll have him go.
So I think like it's very beautiful at first. Like I said before, it's like just love bombing, and I think like after a while you start to see certain things, but you kind of brush it off. It would be like a little like call you maybe like out of your name, or like maybe like a little push, just very slowly, and eventually it like catches up, and you think because those little bits you were like able to like kind of come back from, after a while you're like you can't come back anymore, like when they hit you, like I think, okay, so I passed out, right? So I passed out after a while, like a couple times. I would pass out, and the last time I just was so scared, I called the police. So, I think I ignored so many things until it was too late. It felt like, I was stupid. I felt like, oh my God, I should have done it closer, and my child was right there, like right in front of my kid. So I wasn't much. So I don't think I left because of myself. I left because of my child, because I saw my child just terrified. She was terrified, and it hit me like, I can't do this anymore. Like God said no. Like, I gave you a sign. This is a big red flag. Like, see it, leave, ignore, like don't ignore it. So yeah, like, but until like before it hits that point though, I think we see little things, like even like a little like disrespect, or like a narcissistic type of way. Narcissist, like I think we put a definition on there, but like a lot of times they think nothing is wrong with them, like they're perfect. They seem very perfect from the outside, but like I think Kelly, you said when they're with you, it's like a totally different person, and nobody else believes you. So yeah, like before it even goes that far, I think sometimes we have to recognize it, and it's a practice. We have to practice it, and we have to really look for it, and not be so hopeless romantic type of thing, you know.
Nelson, did you want to chime in? And then Coach K, because I don't think I've heard you speak yet either.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's saying great things, giving great insight. I think I would just add that it can't be overstated how important the techniques that are used to kind of draw a person in, how much they impact you. So, you know, some of the main tools is the love bombing and is the gaslighting, and people don't understand how.
Can you describe like
Mhm.
what gaslighting looks like for those who don't know? Because sometimes if you haven't experienced it, you don't exactly know what's going on. So do you mind describing that?
Yeah, so gaslighting is a tool of deception and a way of interacting with the person that causes you to question your own beliefs, sometimes question your own sanity, and question your own validity whether it's inside of an argument or whether whether it's anything. It causes you to really question if you're right, if you're wrong, and it happens so subtly a lot of times, and it builds up over time to where you become so self-conscious about if you're saying the right thing or doing the right thing that it'll often paralyze you. So you talk about why people have a hard time leaving bad situations a lot of times. It's because they don't understand if they are the person that's wrong, or if they're just crazy for believing this. So a lot of times you'll find people that'll
They'll find
ask,
the
their
part.
friends, like, am I crazy, or is this, you know what I mean? They end up getting to that point where they have to get the validation from other people just to validate what they're feeling and what they're thinking, that it's correct or not. And you see a lot of these tools are really used a lot by people with personality disorders. So whether it is you're dealing with somebody that's the narcissistic personality, where you have the person with the lack of empathy, the interpersonally oppressive behaviors, the arrogant and haughty nature, the grandiosity, those things in the beginning seem like it can seem like chivalry in the beginning. Like, just think about a person that's able to isolate you. Like, we think about a person that's, you're dating someone and they're like, you planned on going out with your friend somewhere, and he's like, no, I want to keep you to myself. I want you to stay home and watch a movie with me. And at first you think, oh, that is so nice. He just wants to spend time with me. It's sweet.
You're right.
Until a pattern starts to happen, that whenever you decide you want to go somewhere or get involved with somebody, there seems to be something to where this person wants you all to their self, and they start dividing you from family and making it seem as though, these people aren't really on your side. I'm the one that truly cares about you. So it's doing a lot of things like that. And it's not, I think somebody mentioned about it not just being physical, it's, emotional, financial, spiritual, and also happens to men too, because men don't realize a lot of times.
Yeah, hold on.
Hmm?
Hold on to that. That's one of the questions.
Okay.
Yeah, hold that thought.
Okay.
We're gonna dive into that. So, but go ahead, continue. Just hold that one.
Well, yeah, no, that's that's just about it. I really try to, especially when I'm working with the young people now, I focus very heavily on personality disorders and recognizing love bombing and gaslighting, because it's running rampant inside of our schools with high school students, and no one's really picking up on that.
That's deep. So how can someone recognize if someone really likes them versus someone love bombing them? What are the distinct characteristics of a love bombing?
I just wanted to say as well that because of at some point we have to be and take accountability for the things that we did or didn't, do when going through this situation. Yes, I was a victim, but I still can take some responsibility and accountability, because the first thing my father told me, I was going too fast. I should have listened. which I didn't. I was young, and I wasn't.
Did you freeze?
Yeah.
you're free.
Okay.
Rose.
Well, Coach K, I don't know if you went. Did you want to go? And then we'll grab some.
Yeah, sure. I'll touch on a few things because this topic is obviously very deep, and there's just so many different aspects that I'm thinking about hearing everyone talk. And I was just doing some research before, and something that came up quite frequently, regardless of the abuse, was control and power. And I thought that was interesting. And I even started to think about even substance abuse and how, someone might think of those as completely different things, which I would agree. But even with substance abuse, sometimes, and not all the time, but people may use a substance, they'll misuse it, if you look at the definition, for sometimes to mask or to distract from a feeling, or whether it's social media, and that's another thing that I saw. But and another thing that I think is interesting is that with domestic violence, for example, hopefully we can say that, that financial abuse is prevalent in like 99% of those cases. And I'm just wondering, because I'm a coach. I don't, work with people clinically. I work with what we would consider high functioning people. So obviously I can separate the two for sure. But I guess I'm just thinking about how I can help young people build awareness. And it depends too, because children oftentimes, if they experience something in childhood, that is going to affect them. I believe it's, considered a schema, and that's going to affect them potentially forever. But of course, there's, counselors like the two individuals here that can help them with that. But ultimately, I'm just wondering if helping young people be aware and rely on themselves in terms of building healthy self-esteem and internal validation so that they're not seeking it from external things, that could prevent possibly, especially the substance abuse, but from abusing other people or possibly being abused themselves, because they can tell the difference. And one last thing with the love bombing, because I'd actually never heard of that, but it makes sense. As far as that manipulation, I would say telling the difference. Love doesn't feel like that. Like someone else loving you shouldn't be keeping you from something else, like their attempts to keep you from something else. You know what I mean? Like, is this love? Does love do this, for example? Like, I'm just, that question's coming to mind, because that's definitely a form of manipulation. And then later, I don't know, or whenever, if we can talk about how I like to be careful about the way people use the word abuse, because sometimes I think that takes away from the cases that are actually abuse. And I'm not saying that people do this, but sometimes I'll just hear people just nonchalant say, yeah, he was being like, verbally abused or mentally abused, or, I forget which one. And I'm like,
a narcissist, that's a word that is being used like everybody's a narcissist now, and they don't even know the definition of a narcissistic person.
I don't think everyone's a narcissist, but I do think there are narcissists.
For sure.
Every narcissist is an abuser.
Right. And that's why I specifically mentioned at the beginning, we have to know what is an abuse so we can know what abuse is. Because when I have mentioned that I've been a victim of domestic violence, people don't believe it. People think that, like I said, they provoke it, or the victim is at fault because they don't know what is abuse, and they immediately think that it's being used just because. And a lot of people are going through domestic violence and they don't call the police, because that's the reality. Most people that go through domestic violence don't call the police until it's really, really like taking a long time going through it. And the ones that are not going through domestic abuse and they are just saying it, they are the ones that call the police. And then, through the investigation, they find out that there wasn't any abuse, that they were probably provoking. So that's why there is this, misuse of the terms of the words. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Coach Shay.
No, you're good. I'm glad you brought that up. And the last thing I'll say is, like you said, it's almost like people watered down the word. But nonetheless, and it's very unfortunate, but it is just so prevalent from the types, and just doing a little research. It's like, man, unless you're seeing it or working in one of these fields, it's just everywhere, and it's really unfortunate, but it's the world, so that's all I'll say for now.
I do want to add, sorry, lady Mogulay, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Yeah, Kelly asked like how we could spot, I think you asked how we could spot an abusive partner, and both Nelson spoke on it. I think like the whole controlling behaviors, that's like top, like you can see that like almost immediately, like if they start talking to you about, like, they met you one way but now they're trying to tell you how to dress or whatever, like and don't get me wrong, because some couples bond over fashion, right? So we're not saying like the over the top stuff where it's like you guys are like having conversations about it, or you're asking for input or insight or stuff like that. But if he's telling you like, oh, why are you dressing like that, like why you got to wear that, or all of a sudden it's like hypercritical, or like if they're like possessive, it like like Nelson said, keep that stuff that you might think is cute in the beginning, where they're saying why they want you, why do you have to go hang out with your friends or whatever. Like, I had to block a guy that I was dating because, like, on the 2 separate occasions that I went to go hang out with friends, he literally had some snarky comment to make. The first comment, and it was always like some insecure, weird stuff like, oh, like, I know all the men are going to be in your face tonight, like weird stuff like that. And then the last time I was out, actually traveling with my sister, and a few of her friends for her bachelorette party. Well, that was, yeah. And he literally, like, I called him, missed his call, and he called me back, and I literally was asleep. And he was like, yeah, I know you probably outside with with dudes in your face. And I'm just like, this again? Like, yeah, no, I'm not doing this.
He's
like,
insecure. Yeah, like most, if not all, of the abusers is insecure.
Right. And that's what I was gonna say. So like the possessiveness, there's like that verbal abuse, there's like them trying to like isolate you, or like if they lash out or say anything, like they might blame it on the alcohol. Jamie Foxx. They might blame it on the alcohol, or they'll try to like say that you provoked it, or I wouldn't have done that if you didn't, that sort of thing. Like, so yeah, it's like important to just pay attention to the little things and take your rose-colored shades off sometimes. Like, we spot these red flags in the beginning and give people the benefit of the doubt, and they end up getting all the benefit and you end up getting all the doubt. And more often than not, when you're getting all the doubt is because you're in that situation where you're not safe, and you should be paying attention to those little signs.
It's
I
crazy.
love that you mentioned the quote.
No, it's crazy because I met him through a friend of mine, right? So like I trusted my friend to find me a good man. So like when I should have known, because the first time they picked me up from the house, he opened the door and he's like, hello, my name is, I'm not going to say the name, and I love long walks on the beach, and I'm your future husband. And I should have known that from time. I'm like, at that point, I'm like, you know what, someone who says that right off the bat, I should have known.
You sound super cocky, like
very. So yes, go ahead.
That's a difficult thing, though, and it is hard to really spot, because love bombing is showering a person with attention and praise, which it actually can be an innocent thing. So it's hard to pick up on sometimes. So really, when that's happening, you have to be really cognizant of. You really need to look at it through a lens of control, and some of the like practical things you can do is watch how this person interacts with others. I always use like the restaurant kind of example. Like if this person is, making you feel like a queen and making themselves sound like to be this great person, watch how they treat the waiter. If they're treating them like, like they're just nothing, or,
Like
anything
help.
like that, you start to kind of build this understanding of what it can look like. And when you're looking at it through the lens of control, love bombing, the person will build you up, make you feel like the best person, the smartest person, the most beautiful. And then once they really have you, you'll do something in their eyes that might be wrong according to them. And they'll do something subtle, like say, "Oh, I thought you were a little bit better than that. I'm a little bit disappointed." And so this creates this mindset in you, like, "Oh no, he's not looking at me the same that he used to. Let me apologize, or let me do what I have to do to get back inside their good graces." And then that's kind of what starts that cycle. So they love bomb you, then they diminish you, and they diminish you to the point to where you get to the point where you can't take it anymore, and you're ready to leave. And then they love bomb you again. They'll do something over the top that reels you back in, apologize, they make you feel like that queen again, and that's what starts the cycle over and over again. And that's kind of what makes it really dangerous.
She didn't
So
leave, so this works on her.
I wanted to add, sorry.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
I wanted to add though, like it's so true, because Saida, when I called the police, everybody around me, even like my friend, said, "Why did you do that? Like, why'd you do that? You should have just like left." But I'm like, he wouldn't leave my house. There's no way it wouldn't have happened, right? So I felt bad, like, and I called him back. It happened, like, I think I called twice, but that was like years. The first year, I'm like, okay, I should have just stayed with that decision, but I didn't, because I felt bad. I felt like, okay, come back, like, and he made me feel really like he literally would do things and say, okay, are you gonna call the police now? Are you gonna call, like, just taunt me, right? And I felt like shit. I felt like a shit person. Like, why did I call? Like, he could be in jail. That's the father of my child. Like, what did I do? But it wouldn't stop. I thought that he would go to anger management, because he got anger management, and like we didn't talk for a little while. So I'm like, okay, he might have changed. But I can say, like, for a person to change their way, how they are when they're angry, is very hard. Like, I don't know, it takes a lot of mindfulness, a lot of like meditation, like wanting to do it. Like, a lot of times, like, he would just have outbursts, and people who don't see it, sometimes they go like they go black out. They black out, and they don't even know what they're doing. And to me, he would be like, "Oh, you bit me, you hit me." I'm like, "No, I didn't." There's times my hands were down. I'm like, "What are we talking about?" And then I start looking like, "Am I crazy? Am I hallucinating? Because I know I didn't do anything."
Oh my God. I've
You know?
been manic before. My ex-fiance, he literally, that was funny that you said that. Like, there were times that he would say things out of his mouth to the point where I had to start, like, look, I'm recording you now, because when you snap out of this, I want you to remember that you said these things. Because when I tell you that you said these things, and when I say I don't feel emotionally safe, when I say that, when I'm trying to communicate like these things to you, when you're not in this like manic, when you're not having these episodes, I don't want you to try to tell me that this didn't happen. Like, you legitimately lied to my face and said that this was so, and now you're telling me that that's not what you said. Like, that's part of it too. And then the other thing, Nelson spoke on something that I can't remember what it was, but when I remember, I'll
Come back in.
come back in. Yeah.
I wanted to speak on Fee mentioned, or was it you, Lady Muggle? One of you mentioned about the clothes, like what you're wearing, and then I remember my ex would do that, and I would literally feel like a crazy person. He would be like, I would get dressed, and then he would be like, "You're not wearing that out with me," and I'm like, "Okay." So I went to change, and then he'd be like, "Why are you going to dress like a hoe?" I'm like, "What do you want me to wear? Do you want to pick it out for me?" I'm like, "Oh my God, I can't even put my own clothes on." And you literally feel like a psycho. Like, so are you okay with this? Are you okay with this? It makes you feel crazy. I remember that was like the craziest time in my life, but it wasn't like that until we started getting engaged. Before, I would get dressed, we'd come out in the car, it would be chill. And I don't know why that switch occurred. My father told me after the fact, because he was so against me being in that relationship when it turned abusive. But I was like, I'm going to try to make it work. I'm going to try to make it work. And I kept saying to myself, he'll never really hurt me. He loves me. He'll never really hurt me. Until one day he said, I think you like it. I think you like. That's what he said. I think you like when I hit you. And I was like, why would you say that? I said, I'm sitting here trying to work it out with you, and you're thinking I want to be abused because I stay. So that was it for me. I think you like it. And I was like, okay. That was the final straw. I was like, okay.
I'm so
not
sorry.
trying to work this out with you anymore.
I'm so sorry.
Something that I think was real quick. Hearing someone describe, I think it might have been Nelson. See, I can't remember, but describing like the manipulation in a way, I can kind of even, and I'm going to only speak for myself, but I don't know if anyone else has felt this way, like when they were in like high school or younger, but I would do that with my boyfriends. Like I would kind of say, like, oh, if you don't text me back, I would almost like abuse myself kind of in a way. Like if he doesn't text me back in this amount of time, this means this. Or he would have to some coaches, we call it a manual, where you basically have them, they have to follow these guidelines. And if they don't, well, either you treat them rotten, you whatever you do, like, it's just, it's not, I don't want to say it's crazy because this is a real thing, but it's crazy when I think back on it, having awareness now, and I've done so much work that I used to treat other people like this, but I didn't know any better at the time. I thought, well, it only takes 2 seconds to send a text. Like, why can't you, or whatever. But it was all from me, my insecurities.
I think sometimes it happens in your family, and you notice things and you don't even know you're picking up these behaviors from your parents. And I'm not saying that's what happened with you, but I remember when I went out with the guy that was my fiance, when I went out with his brother's girlfriends, we all hung out, we started talking, and we were all like, he says that to you? He does that to you? Oh my God. All of the brothers were the same. So they had to get it from somewhere. They had to learn that behavior. And I remember I would go with his family, and if I didn't answer his call, he would be calling his brothers, like, where is she? What is she doing? Is she with one of the other brothers? Like, he was super controlling as far as wondering where I am, what I was doing, who I was with, why I didn't pick up the phone. It was nightmare. And then people say, why didn't you work it out with your child's father? Because I probably will be dead if I would have stayed. And I know a lot of situations do end up like that. So I do think people should get out of abusive relationships. I had a friend, and I actually invited her on, but she was too shy to come. She was in a relationship with a gentleman who would just slap her if she brought a sandwich home with tomatoes, because he didn't like tomatoes. He would hold her at gunpoint. He would light her with matches, just throw lit matches at her. He would hold her in the closet for hours. And if she didn't get out, he probably would have ended her life. Like, you never know at what point it can get to. So that's why I definitely want to have the conversation. And when you're in that situation, it takes a long time when you come out of it to be healed and become whole again. You have to take time to get over that. It took me 4 years. I didn't date for 4 years after that, because it was just, it's traumatic, and yet it changes you in a way.
It definitely changes you. It's like it breaks your spirit almost, because it's like, and then people don't talk about, like, I feel like the hardest part of being in abusive relationships or even being in more than one, sometimes forgiving yourself, it almost feels like you can't trust yourself after because you've betrayed yourself. It's like, can I trust my own judgment now? Like, shit, I still go through moments where I say to my homegirls, like, yeah, no, before I get serious with anyone, you gotta meet him. Or I'll call my brothers, like, yeah, no, you guys gotta, I need like a panel, like an advisory board. My biological father passed away. So like, I don't have, like, I have my stepdad, you know what I mean? But like, even like our family is not like the traditional family. We have like blended family. So it's like, after a while, it's like you think like, I need to make sure that I'm just not diving in to a relationship and missing certain things, you know what I mean? But yeah, a lot of people don't really touch on that. Like, it's a very, very it's a big thing out here. So yeah, that forgiving yourself bit.
And forgiving the other person. That shows
I wanted
true
to
growth.
say,
That's hard.
sorry, I wanted to
Go
say
ahead.
that the best word or the best way to describe it for me and how I ended up, it was like I lost my identity. So I was embarrassed. I've always been very independent. I was the first child in my family. I had to carry a lot of responsibility over my shoulders since I was little. I had to take care of my siblings. So I had a lot of responsibility, and I felt like I put myself in this situation. I should be able to get myself out. That's what kept me there. I didn't stay for too long. I probably stayed for like 6 months, like emotionally invested. After that, I was there physically for my kid, but mentally, I was prepared that that was a it
It
was
was an
it was
exit
a
plan.
bomb and it was gonna explode, and I was just waiting for the moment. It was like 6 months that I was just thinking, how am I gonna do to get myself out of this? Like, I was literally planning or looking for an excuse when it's gonna be the moment. I didn't know when it was gonna be, but I knew that I didn't want it to be there. I talked to myself. I actually questioned myself. I was aware that it was wrong and that whatever was happening, I knew that I was not telling anyone. I knew, like, I was very conscious. And I think I could say it was my strength, my inner strength that kept me strong, because that's what kept me sane in a way. But I remember I used to look at myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize myself. I didn't like the person that I used to look in the mirror. I stopped dressing or using clothes that I used to wear. And I don't dress provocative. At least I don't think so.
You just didn't put like an effort like you used to.
Exactly. No effort at all. My hair is very curly. I used to wear it just in a bun or a ponytail, like nothing, sometimes not even wanting to detangle my hair. And like, I didn't take care of myself, but this person he had the need to put me down. So I had a high, like, not low self-esteem in a way. When we met, I was vulnerable, but he had a low self-esteem to the point that he had to put me down to make himself feel better and be better. And all these things happen in such a short time frame. But again, I lost my identity, like that, simple as that. I look at myself, I couldn't recognize myself. And when that physical part got to that point where I was like, again, I didn't, it didn't happen for too long. It was just like 2 times. The first time it was like choking, and then I was like, I'm going to call the police, which I did. From the very first time that happened, the physical abuse, I called the police. The police arrived the next day, and by the next day, he had already went on his knees.
The next day?
The next day you could have been dead.
So by this time, he had already went on his knees. He cried. He said, "Forgive me. I'm not gonna do it again," and all these things. And that part of you that thinks that they can change. And I remember my dad's words: "You're not, a rehab center for nobody." I still have it in my mind. So I thought that he would be able to change. But again, when the second time happened, I could see it in his eyes that this is not going to change, and I was able to scream to the neighbors for help, and I grabbed something, and I was like, I'm not afraid to use it. So if you're gonna do something, make sure you kill me, because out of this,
Yeah.
I'm not allowing it. And I think when, I, in a way that kind of, he didn't like it, that the fact that I called the neighbors, because I couldn't trust the police. I couldn't call the police. I didn't have the phone in my hands. I couldn't do it. So I screamed out to the neighbors, and like, it was very close. So people got really close to the door and asked me to open the door. But I wanted to say is that I think that strength that I still had inside, that wanted to get out, and I was conscious that I needed to get out of there, is what pushed me. And then the very, very first time that the very first person I called, it was my sister. And I told her, but she also pushed me in a way to talk to my dad, because she's like, I cannot break my dad's heart with this. I cannot tell him this. You have to call him and you have to tell him. And I think that she gave me the other part of the strength, that she reassured me that my dad was not going to let me down. So when I called my father, I didn't even have to explain nothing. Till today, 10 years later, I have never told my dad that I was going through that. All I have to say is, get me out of here. When he answered the phone, it was like 11 p.m. And I was like, can you get me out of here? And all he said is, gather your stuff, as many things as you can, so you don't have to go back. I think in a way he knew, because years later, my sister told me, you look miserable. You were not the joyful person. You were not the happy person that you were. And that's why I say, like, I lost my identity.
Part of losing your identity. Yeah.
I didn't know who I was, because I wasn't Saida. It was not the person that everybody knew. I didn't tell my best friend. Nobody knew, like literally zero. Nobody knew. And my daughter was a baby. My daughter was a baby.
Nobody knew, but everybody knew.
Like, yeah, in a way. And my daughter was a baby, but again, consciously, I knew that I didn't want my daughter to witness this and grow up thinking that this was a normal behavior. So that's why I was like, I have to be out of here. And I think that's the best decision, because years later, he still did it with someone else. And years later, he still did it with someone else, and still the same. So that's why I'm a survival, and I don't regret. That was the best decision ever.
Yeah, see, with mine, he was law enforcement, so he got away with it. So it was just kind of like, yeah, go to therapy, deal with it, and just pray that he doesn't do it to anyone else. And that's what it's been. And it's crazy, because I know I moved on with my life, and his current, I don't know if it's his current girl or if it was him, but somebody texted me saying that she's his current girlfriend, and was still talking to me about.
You're like texting her, get out, get out, get out.
Listen, I blocked the number, and it was still blocked. It was still texting me. I was like, leave me alone, stalker. Like, it's been 2 years. Like, I don't think about you. I don't think about it. Like, I don't think about him. Like, why are you texting me? So it's like, it's a cycle. Like, sometimes, and that's the other thing. Oh, that's what I was going to say earlier. Nelson was speaking about how they speak to the waiter.
Mm-hmm.
Also, another thing is how they speak about people that they've dated in the past, or people that they've had falling outs like with.
Let me guess. Are they crazy?
They're always crazy. Or if a B word slides in there. Or I always feel like men who can call women out of their name, those derogatory terms, I feel like they have abusive tendencies to them. Like, I always say that. Like, if you have that vitriol and that disdain toward, or even with women who speak down on guys, or any of those derogatory terms when you're talking about someone that you once loved, either one, they're not over it, and you still shouldn't be seeing them, because why are you that passionate and so, like, up in arms and triggered? And
you can tell when someone's over them. They're just like, yeah, that person. It's
Right.
like neither here nor there.
Or you're verbally abusive, mentally abusive, and take zero accountability for what took place in that relationship. So that's another thing that that's what I forgot earlier. It just came back to me.
So is that loss of identity? Is that normal?
That happens with people when they are, I think a lot of times when they're trying to, how should I say this? There's some people that don't have a good sense of identity before they get abused, and you got those people, and then you have the abuser that tries to deceive them that they can have that identity with them. So you have those group, and then you have the other ones that have a good sense of identity, but somehow they might have areas of brokenness in them or unhealed wounds. And then you'll have the abuser trying to have their identity into their identity. And there's this unhealthy codependency thing where they're trying to meet that need. But I wanted to say to all of you that were mentioning about taking back your power, of like who you are, not allowing the control. That's what I love, what Saida, what you were talking about. And, I know a lot of you were sharing various experiences of how you overcame it. But you think an abuser is misusing power, whether it's been a loved one or someone, a parent or whatever, it could be anybody. And they're in a position that they're trying to control you, manipulate, deceive, diminish, any kind of way to control who you are, whatever it is that their intention is. But what I love is seeing that, Saida, you had a big why, and your big why was, I don't want to go this way. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get out. And your why was so big for your kids. Your why was big generationally to not continue this. And so I believe, like, when there is a shift, it has to be a mind shift, because when you get you're filled with all these lies and you don't know how to get out of it. Like the lie of, well, if I stay with him, maybe he'll change. Or the lie of, well, what about my kids if they have kids with him? Or, well, what am I going to do when we're not together? It takes that courage to choose, like, I want to take my identity back, or I want to not have this to repeat with my kids, or I don't want, like, and I know Kelly was saying, abuse can come in many forms, and whether it's even finances and other things, like, hey guys,
can you also touch on that, what financial abuse looks like? Do you mind?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, is it Kelly?
Yeah,
right?
I said, can you touch on that, what financial abuse looks like? Because it may look like provision. Can you hear me okay?
Well, I mentioned it earlier when he was trying to sabotage my job opportunities and mess with, like, my professional network. My ex leaked my social security card and, like, my birth certificate right along with it to make sure that he put the nail in the coffin. Yeah, like,
that's not cool.
It's yeah, like they do a lot, like, to make sure that they set you up to be.
So can it ever look like, hey, I make the money, you are the stay-at-home, so do what I say?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it can look like running up. It could be anything from running up debts in your name, controlling the finances, locking you out of passwords and being able to even kind of see what's going on. There's a lot of different ways financially. It all boils back to that theme of dependency and control. It's everything that makes you become indebted to that person. So there's a lot of different ways that can happen.
You
Can I ask you a
saying that just
question?
reminded
Oh, sorry.
me. I know someone that happened to. He was very well off, and the person that he was marrying, they were independent, but it was almost like he wanted her to depend on him. So he was like, I'll buy you the Mercedes. Don't worry. Like, she's like, no, it's out of my budget. And he was like, don't worry, I'll make the payments. So if they ever break up, she's depending on him to pay for her car. And like, oh, let's build credit together as a couple. I never looked at it like,
or even some
it was on purpose.
Yeah, and in some situations, even it's going to sound crazy, and I probably whatever, but like even where like some women are saying like I'm not contributing anything when at one point she said she would. So now it's like all the financial responsibility is on him, or vice versa, whoever the breadwinner is. So yeah, just any kind of leeching that violates the agreement that was made. Yeah.
Perfect segue into men are abused too.
I was gonna say, what about the kids too, or like even pregnancy? Like, I mean, and I wanted to ask Nelson.
What do you mean?
Like, for example, and I would like hate to, I don't want to say that it's out of question, but I'm wondering if it can be used as a form of manipulation so that a guy doesn't leave, for example.
To get pregnant on purpose so the guy stays?
Like I have anecdotal on one person, but I've heard of that, or even saying like, but then again, if you're under the same household, it's probably harder to manipulate someone that you're not even like with, but then again, I don't know. It still could be done, but I wanted to see what Nelson, you thought.
Yeah, I mean, so yes, that can be, and you can really kind of look at it under the assumption that anything that is used as a weapon against you or a tool to create that control and dependency. So whether it is with women, sometimes it's getting pregnant to keep a man, even if he does not want a child. It could be withholding pregnancy, like not agreeing to have a child. On the guy side, it could be getting someone pregnant to trap her down. So anything that's used with the motive of forming a dependency or control can kind of fit into the categories of abuse. And it's the problem with the word abuse now is we're not looking at it on a scale. We're not looking at how severe is it that we're looking at abuse that affects your daily functioning, or what can be considered abuse just under the letter of the law. Because when you think about sexual abuse, or also known as sexual coercion, technically a woman withholding sex from a man with the purpose of controlling him and making him beg for it and things like that, that's technically considered abuse too. So we always need to look at these things in context and look at it inside of a scale of severity.
So can we talk about that abuse for men? Because I know it happened. Say it.
I'm sorry. Sorry. I'm outside, but I connected from my phone. But wouldn't it be the same abuse from a man trying to do something against the woman's will?
Yes.
And is that only in marriage, or how does that work?
No, don't get me wrong. I'm sorry. Don't get me wrong. I think withholding it to a form of manipulation is totally wrong. like if you talk about it and you feel like it really affect me, emotionally, because that's what happens. And probably men don't understand it, that when a woman is upset about something emotionally, that kind of blocks our entire body from wanting to have intimacy with our men, because it's a form of connection. And that's why it's not intentionally that I am going to withhold it intentionally to manipulate him. But if he did something that is not right, and I am feeling that is not right because affect me emotionally, I don't feel the connection. I don't feel like I want to connect with him. Like, I don't feel that I want to be intimate with him. I think it has to be a clarification. Like, for me, it will be explaining him that at the moment I don't feel like, to have intimacy, that let's work it out. Let's talk about it. Let's get to a point where like I feel comfortable. I don't want to do it. It's not my intention. It's just my body not feeling comfortable. And if let's say he was the one that made a mistake, because we're not perfect, he has to find a way to, compensate, not with money, because that's not what I'm saying. That's what people think. Like some way, somehow he has to earn my trust. Oh shit, you're gonna, sorry. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, that goes back to talking about your inner motives. Like when your motive is to create dependency or for control, then that's completely different than something's biologically going on with you, and your hormones are off, and there's a lack of desire. Those are kind of different situations. When it comes to men, unfortunately, it is swept under the rug, and it's dealt with a lot more than people think, because a lot of times when you think of like a personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, you think of it in terms of men, but there's very high numbers of it in women too. But the problem is that it looks different, because for men, it tends to play on our view of masculinity. So you look at us, men tend to have this desire to be the protectors and providers. So a narcissistic woman comes in, and her love bombing is going to make it look more like, oh, you're my king. You always take care of me. I'm this damsel in distress, and I need you to come in and save me. And then whenever you do something wrong, it's, I thought you were my protector. How could you do this? You're not a man. And then the man goes into the cycle of, trying to win back her affection too. And then there's also threats of harm. That is really big. So when there's like a breakup or something like that, there's been so many men that I've worked with that women hold them hostage with emotions. You want to be that protector and that provider, and you end up having a fight and you break up, and she texts you a picture of an empty pill bottle. And now you're going crazy. You're rushing over there thinking that you have to save her. Like, those are things so that she can control you and keep you inside of this, this situation. So it happens to men so much, but it is a lot harder to identify, because we're used to the typical traits of narcissistic personality and antisocial personality. We're used to seeing those traits played out in men. It's just a lot different in women.
I'm looking at the statistics right now, and it's unfortunately, and it is kind of that difficulty with men and being masculine and not, because I'm just now doing this, looking this up, so I'd have to do a deep dive, but they didn't have a stat for the amount of men being the victim of.
It's 1 in 9.
For sexual is what I'm getting at.
But I don't think men will.
But you're right though.
It.
For one,
right.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think it'll happen, but I don't think men will report it like women.
Right.
Oh,
and
my wife beat my ass. Like, I just can't see them making that phone call.
Yeah.
Like,
what's interesting is, I remember this reporter. He was a male reporter, and he's not popular because some people probably think he's controversial. But regardless, at one of the women's march, a girl came up and grabbed his private area, and things like that. I want to keep it on topic, of course, but things like that, men, he ended up actually pressing charges, and but I think men might feel that, they can't report it, or, like you said, Kelly. And something too that I think is unfortunate, Nelson, of course, you can comment on this. And also, Leilani, is that how I say it? I want to make sure I'm saying it right. Okay, perfect. As far as, I guess, therapists and counselors go, as far for men, like male therapists, and because I did read when I was in school about, even for veterans, oftentimes they want to see someone who has also been a veteran, but like, let's, translate that even to males wanting to see a male counselor, but there's not many men going into the field. And I wonder if that's also too to deal with the emotional side. And I do think that is an issue. I don't like to say blanket statements, but that is definitely an issue with our society, with men, and just this idea that they don't have emotions. Like, they're humans too. What? Like, emotions, until we've evolved, but emotions are what drove us to survive, right? I mean, we needed that stuff. I mean, we still need them. They're just as important, but they just look differently. We're not in danger all the time like we were when there was an animal about to eat us or whatever,
Leilani, have you experienced that, counseling men that have been abused?
Yeah, actually, they're different ages. Like I worked with adults, male adults in the psych hospital. And I've also worked with young adolescent boys that were in residential in the hospital. And I've also watched my dad be abused, and I've watched how men, male friends, I have a lot of male friends that will open up to me about, I need wisdom about this situation, and I'll say, she's abusing you. So, yeah, so I believe with abuse, it transcends. It's the same for male and female. That when you are disrespecting and causing someone physical, mental pain, and misusing that power and mistreating them, it can happen. So for men, I'll just give this as an example. My observation has been where, I know earlier, sorry guys, the financial abuse thing, I don't know, I was thinking it was for Kelly. I couldn't hear too well with the phone. I mean, the sound. So, but this is an example. Financial abuse. There are women that, and I'm just saying, even married women, or women that are maybe even with with someone who is a boyfriend, or whatever their relationship is. But men are designed to be providers, a lot of times, and sometimes you have single moms that have been both roles too. But most men that I talk to, they really, and Nelson could chip in there if but men are linear thinkers. They process differently, but depending on their life style and how they were raised, if they have unmet needs, there's some men that are probably a little bit more emotional than other men. I have a friend that is more tenderhearted, and he talks a lot. And some people say he acts like a girl, the way he connects with females and things. And he's straight, but he just has those tendencies. And he always picks women that abuse him. And he'll ask me questions on, what do you think this is? And there was somebody who was diagnosed with bipolar. I said, well, she is in an inconsistent mood, and you have a problem rescuing women that use you. And she's using you and abusing you. Now, is she physically hurting him? No. Is she wanting to use his money and abuse him? Yes. And he just had a moment where he says, I can't be around her. I feel like I can't get I mean, she yells and cusses at me when I don't give her what she wants. It's like she has a little tantrum, So now we don't hear those cases a lot of times, I think, because most men don't talk about it. Most men don't talk about their feelings, but some people they can probably share it with. But I've seen where men like they don't know how to communicate their emotions sometimes, more than that. And there's a saying, I think it was TD Jakes or something. He said that, you know, when God made man and woman, he took the rib out. He took the emotional part of a man, some of it, because it's like we got a lot of, because women sometimes it's it's easier for us, but there's some women too that can't communicate well either. So I've seen it in that way with men. I've also seen men be abused through their mother. They didn't have certain needs met as a child, and then they become just like people who are wounded or hurt. They have walls they put up in their heart, and I've watched these men that have a family. They don't say "I love you" to their kids, and I see men that do say it because they don't want to be like they were when they were abused by their mother. Um, Now, I've seen when I worked at the psych hospital, they trained us that 98% of the patients were abused. And so we did a lot of training with how to respond with everybody in the hospital. And the residential side, these are kids that are, they've lived there. They've basically been there for about a year. And those boys, there were a lot of boys that were in gangs, and they didn't love them, didn't their dads were in jail or they didn't raise with a father, and maybe their mom, and a lot of, I know Nelson mentioned about personality disorders. We on adult psych, we had so many personality disorders of higher functioning adults, and people who have had personality disorders, like their egos like Swiss cheese. They don't have a good sense of self identity, and a lot of times you're around with people with personality disorders, you want to run out of the room, because they want to pull, and they wear you out and they drain you. But what I found with how men respond to that, whether it's with women or even in residential, when I would see the young boys there, the way they responded was very similar to the way adult men respond. And it was that a lot of times it takes them a while to articulate those feelings, and uh, and so that's why I love doing art therapy, because it all shows in the art. They don't feel like it's threatening for them, and a lot of times with the men, I find that men's brain, they gotta, they have a lot of categories in their mind. They have a category for that and this and this and that, and they don't connect. So it takes them a while. Women, we're like, go A to Z, whatever, and we, we're like that. So
We can
then
do
you
it all.
then you
But they
add
compartmentalize.
yeah, and men have a nothing box. Like, they don't want anything in there, but they don't want a woman to go in there and fix it, and then they get abused. You know what I mean?
Where is that box? I want one.
Yeah. So it's just, I believe, anyway, to answer your question, it's like, I believe men process abuse a certain way. And, I remember, I'll just say this and I'll end with this, but my mother, I watched my mom abuse my dad, and she would belittle him. She would call him names and say, you know, the old man over there, when he comes home, he pouts and blah, blah, blah. But then when she got close, and then I'd watch her physically hit him, like beat him. My dad he wasn't big. He was a short Filipino man. And she would always be the one, the aggressor. She would be the one that would actually start hitting him. And I'd have to pull her off of him. My dad's very thin and short, and he had bruises on him, and he was trying to defend himself. And I watched my dad wouldn't hit her. But I would watch him just, and I think a lot of men go through this. I mean, Nelson can comment on this, but when men are around women that keep attacking them or dripping faucet or whatever, they shut down. They, they don't, they go through a time where they either will withdraw, they want to go into their man cave and process. Um, and sometimes I've seen, like my dad, I've seen other men some of them don't want to deal with it. Or some men will just, like if they're in a relationship, they will find a woman that can meet that need, and that's where an affairs start. And so, it becomes a way they process things so that um, they're trying to find out what is right with responding to situations. But like my friend, for example, that wanted to break out of the abuse, it's a male. Like Saida and others here, there's a point where you just go, I'm not going anywhere with this. Like, this is what I hear with men. Some, honestly, I liked working with men that wanted to work through it, because it was like they just said, I'm not doing it. And they didn't go into an emotional rabbit trail or anything, and they would just respond. But some guys, they feel false responsibilities. And which I was looking at one of the other questions, which I don't know if we're on that question yet, but it's that number 4. Why do some people feel like it's their fault they're abused? And
that was the next question. So and I think a lot of people were kind of hitting on it, but I do want to make that a main topic. Why some people feel like it's their fault when they're abused. Because I know some people are codependent and they feel like they can save people, or they can help, or they can make them change. And then they end up feeling like it's their fault in the end. So I do want to have that conversation. I find that most people that get abused, they end up saying, well, I caused it. So why is that?
When I get a lot of when I get a lot of men that come to my office, it's usually men don't come to my office to deal with feelings. That's usually, those are very rare occurrences. What I tend to kind of work on and prior to whatever belief there was previously, men are incredibly emotional. Like when they get to the point that they're seeing a therapist, they don't realize it's because they're emotionally broken. But what I tend to work on them first is with talking about their experience, because that's something that that for some reason we really connect on. Is when you're working with somebody, you're dealing with your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. That's like the tenets of cognitive behavioral therapy. With men, a lot of times you want to focus on how they think about situations, how do they interpret those situations, and then as a result of how they interpreted them, what are the connected behaviors that they're showing along with it. So for the guys that I've dealt with that have been dealing with relationship issues, whether it is a personality disorder in the person that they're with, or whether it's bipolar, and that is a very, very, very difficult thing. When you're dealing with those flight of emotions, especially like with a bipolar person, you can easily feel like the villain. And if you just do a little bit more, if you just change the way you do this and change the way you do that this person will stop talking to you the way that they're talking to you. They'll respect you more, not realizing that it doesn't have anything to do necessarily with what you're doing. Is more so what's going on internally for them. But for men, I usually do not connect with them on emotions. That's usually a byproduct of working specifically on the way we think. And that's usually what grabs men, is being able to talk about like why this situation went this way, why did this relationship start to fall apart, what they thought about it. That tends to be what really what really grabs men. And a lot of times when my working with men is as a result of having a couple come in. So I'll have a couple come in and evaluate them and realize that maybe his partner is dealing with something and taking it out on him. For instance, like maybe the woman dealt with abuse in her past, and I love how y'all talked about earlier taking time to heal, and the ones that did not take the time to heal, they brought a lot of negative baggage into their next relationship, and unconsciously they might have gotten with a good guy afterward, but unconsciously they're used to the negative behaviors, and they form this core belief that all men are dangerous, all men are the same. So they start unconsciously doing these little tests to find out if this person will go there, if they'll go to that level. Will he actually hit me? Will he actually curse me out the same way these other guys did? And they don't realize that they sometimes push those buttons and push the envelope to cause it to happen. And it can happen. You can push a guy emotionally to the point where he breaks and he realizes that the only way he gets a favorable response from you is to talk the way you're used to being talked to. And so it creates this just negative cycle where, you know, hurt people. But kind of lost track of what I was going there. But yeah,
I mean, that was good stuff. That was like the best rabbit trail I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, it was very clear. And no, go ahead.
No, you're good.
No, I was literally just saying, like Nelson, he touched on so many points. Like the other thing that I haven't really heard anyone speak to, I mean, we touched on it a little bit earlier, is that like a lot of men who are abusive come from like abusive backgrounds. I know, like when it came to like my ex, he and I had witnessed domestic violence in my household coming up, and he really witnessed it coming up. And like he was in his mom's hands one time when she was beat to life support, you know. So like in her arms. So like, you know, or at least that's what he told me, because now I question everything he said. But I do know that it exists because I also spoke with his sisters. But yeah, like it was a thing where it's like, you know, sometimes the guys resent the mom for that and then turn around and take it out on the women that they're in relationships with, for one reason or another, because his parents were married. It was, to this day they're still legally married, but like, you know, he still had like a great relationship with his dad, and his relationship with his mom is there, but his relationship with his dad is way better. They have like more of a bond, even though like it's still not there. But that to say, like, you know, there are things that like I feel like it is cyclical. It's definitely something that people don't pay attention to. Like when you're getting to know a person, whether or not they're actually facing what it is that like they'll tell you about that dynamic, and sometimes they don't because they're embarrassed and they might feel broken, you know, or they feel like, you know, that's not something they could share. But I know for me, that was like, until it got physical, that was something that I was willing to look past, because it's like we all go through our stuff, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't, until I felt like it was becoming like, once it got to the point of like those manic episodes of screaming at me for hours and I'm literally not arguing back and I'm literally just sitting here and I'm just like, and then like when it started to get too taxing, it was like, okay, now you got to go deal with this on your own. Like I'm not dealing with this anymore. But like a lot of times people don't realize, like, again, how much of an impact that those childhood experiences, the upbringing, all those things can have on a person, and how it can manifest itself into them creating those dynamics that seemed like a norm, but those making that dysfunction normal for them. And like Nelson said, provoking, and I hate to say provoking because it's like, you're literally so used to, like with him, he would say to me, like, he was used to having a woman that was like always wanting to argue, always wanting to be combative. So if I wasn't doing that, it was like I didn't care, or I was too nonchalant, or like I didn't, I wasn't really I wasn't paying him any attention, or he wasn't getting the attention that he wanted. Like he wanted to get a rise out of me. That was what he was used to. That was what he was accustomed to. So like it's literally a thing where like we have to pay attention. We got to get to know the people that we're dating. We have to get to know like what it is that like figure out what it is, like those quote unquote things that people like to call toxic traits that like folks feel like they need to feel loved in a relationship based on whatever it is, their past or whatever.
And I think a lot of times when someone is in an abusive relationship, even if it's with their parents, because I remember my cousin, his mom abused him terribly. And I remember growing up, like I was in a very healthy family relationship. My parents never argued. I thought that they were happily married and in love. I knew that they had their disagreements, but we never saw it. It would be after we all went to sleep, they would go into the room and they would speak about it. We would never, ever, I've never seen them argue in my entire life. So I didn't even know what arguing was. I just thought you have conversations when you're upset. You talk it over and there's a resolve at the end. To see abuse, the first time I ever saw it, my dad made us all sit down and watch What's Love Got to Do with It, with Ike and Tina Turner. And he was like, this is what you never let a man do to you. And I was like, I can't believe he did that. People, this happens. It was so weird to me because I had never seen it. And then I noticed as I got older, my aunt would abuse my cousin. And like, I remember like when we would get in trouble, my dad would sit us down. He would have a conversation. We did get disciplined, but it was always, okay, you're spanked. I love you. Let's go on and move on. Like you got this was the consequence for your action. It was never an abusive thing. But I remember he would do something and she would grab like a metal spoon and bop him on the head and make him bleed. And I was like, what just happened? And I was like, Dad, like, is this normal? To him, it was. When he got older, he thought that a loving relationship meant he had to put hands on his woman. And how unfortunate, all the girls he ever dated, he abused. And I would witness it. I'm like, why? He would bring him over and he would just slap them in front of the family. I would, why are you staying with him? He's horrible to you. Oh, he's just playing. But all of his girlfriends he abused. I was like, I will call the cops for you. I don't care if he's my cousin. But they would stay. They would stay. They would stay. So
I want to mention just random thoughts. Sorry. I like what Leilani mentioned a couple times about unmet needs. I think if you're sorry, I have a break. Sorry. If you're in an abusive relationship and their personality is so larger than life, right? Especially narcissists, right? Like what are they doing now? It's always like you're always on eggshells, and so your needs, meaning like your emotions, everything is just slowly dying down. And so that's a big thing that just came to my mind, is that you lose yourself. I think you said, Kelly, loss of self, loss of identity, and that's a big thing that happens because one's personality is larger than life. And so now you're like, what are they doing? Oh, it's them. When it was, for me growing up,
it's their world and you just revolve around
we're just living in their world, honestly. And so if it's like my dad's coming, okay, everyone quiet, or and then like if he's arguing, we would all be like, unfortunately, we would be, seeing it. So kids were involved and things like that, watching and seeing things. And so again, just our needs, those emotional needs, like even when I just got married and, initially, like I just say, everything is okay. Like he'd be like, I didn't really even have opinions about things. So I built my self-esteem, built my confidence, started having opinions about things. So it's a process.
Now you're on a panel.
Unmet needs,
and now you're a panel giving your opinion.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Thank you. Oh yeah. Thank you.
That's awesome.
I think it is definitely a reality that those who are abused, if they don't deal with it, and deal with it in the sense that they don't seek help, seek that healing, seek that treatment really to, heal, but also acquire the skills to manage, what their thoughts and emotions in a healthy way, they will become the abusers. And it's something that I try to do really in my all around in my life, besides just coaching, is to find understanding, which is really, really hard when someone is when they're abusing someone. But it's interesting though, how almost every time, like I'm reading David Goggins' second book, and he dealt with terrible abuse, and his dad was abused. His dad eventually, physically abused him and his brother and his mom, but his dad had also experienced it. So it's like breaking that cycle through, the help and the services that are out there.
Now, like with his children, or did he?
See, I don't know, because I think he only has one child. But I would imagine, I cannot speak for sure, but I would imagine no, just the way he writes and just the way that he's dealt with it. But however, his brother, which is interesting, his brother kind of acted like it didn't even happen. But he stayed with their dad, and then David and his mom left. So I don't know. And I don't know if that was a way to kind of detach from it, to completely suppress it. But ultimately it's still theirs. But, that trauma is still going to be there no matter what.
If you're suppressing it, you've never dealt with it.
Right. And, and that's going to come up in a way or another. But I just think I just love that we're having this conversation, because abuse is never going to end. Like, it's always going to be a thing, so, which is unfortunate, of course, but humans are so complex. The brain is so complex. And then just the experiences that nature and nurture. But knowing that opens us up to having these conversations like this from a knowledge perspective, with Nelson, Leilani especially, but then, all of us too, but also from a compassionate and I guess graceful way, because unfortunately it's always going to be a thing. So,
Nelson, did you want to chime in? I thought you came off the mic.
I've long since lost my thought.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry.
It's all right. It'll come back at some point.
Well, did anyone else want to chime on this particular topic? Because I do have one more final question. I know we're reaching the 2-hour mark. I just have one more question. And you all know what it is. I want to know, what does a healthy relationship look like? So we did talk about abuse. Can we expound on what it looks like to have a healthy relationship between, like, from a female and a male perspective?
So I can speak to this because I feel like I've seen between my grandparents very healthy relationship, and also I feel like I'm probably in a budding healthy relationship. So I would think it's based on mutual respect, trust, communication, resolving conflicts in a healthy way, being able to have disagreements without loss of affinity for one another, encouraging each other, uplifting one another, respecting each other's autonomy, no like no manipulation. Just
It's
like,
so easy to manipulate.
what'd you say?
It's so easy to manipulate, even by accident. Just be like, you don't want to do that for me, but it's like they don't want to, but you're manipulating them.
Right.
It's so easy.
But I mean, both people being self-aware enough to take accountability for those moments when you're falling short and maybe manipulating that person and hold, and just holding space for growth with one another, in a way that, like, there's no pressure to be 100% perfect because we're humans, but also, like, just being mindful, like, of one another. So I don't want to take all of it, but that's just my idea of what a healthy relationship looks like. So y'all can have at it.
Very well said. I just wanted to add that if abuse, I think we said the word control a lot, so it's the opposite of control. If it's a healthy relationship, it would just be two people that are encouraging one another, as you said, beautifully said, and just, not having that control, not the manipulation, not checking on their phone. There's this trust that's there, but also both are two individuals that are mutually, helping each other or supporting each other be the best they can be. But two individuals at the end of the day, not so much codependency.
That was good. And that reminded me of something I was thinking about earlier, because a lot of times you'll see friends have their location notifications on or whatever, like they're sharing their location. And I don't have an issue with that. It's to each their own. But I think it's interesting, though, because I think it can be weaponized for sure. But as far as a healthy relationship goes, this is like my jam, because I had to grow so much. And Kelly, you know that. I mean, I talk about this all the time because he's not my husband, but he left me because I was not nice. And I did a lot of work. So I will say a healthy relationship is dropping the manual. So basically the guidelines that in order for me to feel happy, he has to do this. He has to tell me I'm beautiful, XYZ, otherwise I'm going to be mad. Or expecting a mind reader. Well, that's not a healthy relationship. Communicating. I'm not going to speak that this is all men, but give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, he's not being malicious if, let's say, he forgot to say something, or you're expecting him to pick something up, and it's like, just ask him. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have to make this any more complicated. And say
you're making me think of a meme I saw earlier.
Yeah.
It was like, honey, just so you know. No, it was if women were actually honest. And then she was like, just so you know, I'm testing you right now. Whatever you say is going to affect my mood for the rest of the day. Do I look fat?
Right. See, that is a perfect example, like the tests.
But men don't know. They're just like,
and I think that's almost like a way. I think there's a difference between vetting. That's the hot button word in this space, in testing. Like testing again, like, I just don't think it comes, you have to know for yourself if it's coming from a good place. And then another, go ahead.
That's a good one. When you said testing, I know Nelson said earlier about some women will test men when they've been in an abusive relationship, and it almost like pushes them to become abusive. Where is the healthy boundary in that? To test them to make sure they're not abusive, but also not push them to abuse. Like,
but why test them? And how isn't that like playing games? That's a form of manipulation, right?
I don't know, because I know people always use the word vet, but there has to be some form of checking that they're not crazy, they're not malicious, they're not.
Or you guys cycle through the relationship and see what it's like to deal with conflict. We're humans. We're bound to like have like a moment of contention where it's like, like we're not like, I can't see any two human beings seeing eye to eye all the time. Like, there's never going to be like uncomfortability at any time, or even just having a conversation like, hey, how did you, when did you have a a tough time in your last relationship? And how did you guys work through it? Like, how do you react in conflict? Like, having those honest conversations versus, I don't want anyone testing me because you back me against the wall. I'm clawing my way out. You know what I mean?
Ask that is because Coach K said testing in a positive way, but Nelson said people.
Oh no! Oh no!
Like,
I don't think.
Where's that boundary?
Right? Yeah. See, well, there definitely is a boundary, and I don't think testing is good either, because it's almost like I'm just gonna watch them and kind of like set them up to see. Versus, I think having standards for sure, but you want to be yourself at the same time, and let that other person be themselves. Because if you're testing them, I mean, and it depends on what it is, but are you really being authentic? Like, are you allowing them to be authentic in a way? I mean, again, it just depends what it is.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you said like testing instead of vetting. That's
testing versus vetting, like the difference. Because I think people think that when they're testing, they're vetting. Right. And I don't, you know what I mean? And I don't think that's the case. But that's a great question. And Nelson, you have to speak on this. My last thing is saying sorry, being self-aware, which is what Lady Moglet said. I would say being in charge of your emotions versus making them in charge. Difficult, but that does require self-awareness and saying sorry, because when you're in charge of your emotions, that's when you feel, I guess, I'm okay with saying sorry because it's warranted, but you can kind of put your pride aside, and it doesn't mean that, like, I'm a weak person or I'm evil. Just the other day, I'll share a quick story. Just the other day, my husband came home and he lifted a PR, and he was telling me how, like, the first, single, like the bar, he felt it like loose or whatever. And then I guess he got nervous, and then they switched the bar. And all I'm thinking about is, why would you, if you felt it like that, like, why would you do that? Because I'm just thinking, like, oh my gosh, you're lifting the heaviest weight you've benched before, like, and I'm just thinking, guys, sometimes they're just silly and they don't want to go through the extra work to maybe, instead of lifting that first set or whatever, that first rep, go change the bar out versus still trying to, pull it down and lift it up. Anyway, he's, really happy because he just lifted, he just reached a PR. And my ass was like, why didn't you just switch it out? Like, if you felt like it was, and then I was kind of like questioning him about like the bars and stuff, and maybe possibly making it mean that, well, does he think that I haven't lifted? Like, I don't know what barbells are? I don't bench as much as him, for sure. I don't hardly ever bench.
So instead of celebrating it with him, you like.
So we kind of like separated, like, he went to the living room, and I was thinking, I'm like, I do care, and I do want to make sure he's safe, but that wasn't the time. So I went out there and I said, I still mean that I want you to be safe, but I'm sorry for the timing that I said that. And, I'm really like proud of you. And I think that's awesome. So I just apologized, and it could have been fine. Like, we probably we weren't really fighting, but I just felt like, what, that wasn't right. That's not right to treat him like that. You know what I mean? So I apologize. And it's funny because then we like laugh and it was fine. So I think that's part of a healthy relationship. So
she's like, and that's how it's done.
Took a lot of work, but yeah, feels good though.
Nelson, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so when it comes to vetting, that's really a buzzword that's thrown around a lot in these spaces now. People talking about it all the time, and it's always these very subjective things that in the end don't end up working. For me, it really.
I just hate that word. Everybody.
Yeah, I really hate the word. It really only takes.
Use a synonym, like God.
it really only takes 3 months to learn a person if we are really intentional about what we do and how we learn. Like when you're meeting someone, I feel like everybody should kind of look at it in terms of bio, psychosocial, spiritual. That's whenever you're thinking about learning a person, you want to know about the biology, meaning health problems that they have, and how that contributes to the way they behave or act or what they think. Psychological, how do they think about things? Is there a history of mental health issues inside of the family, or are they dealing with anything themselves, and how does that play out in real life for them? Social, how do they deal with friends? Do they have friends? Do they have too many friends? Are they people pleasers, or are they more avoidant? What's that? Spiritual. Do they have a relationship with God? Is that actually something that's important to you? How is that relationship played out practically in terms of everyday life? If you are intentionally like talking to someone and learning about them, you'll get to see the full range of their emotions within 3 months. You'll see what they're like when they're upset. You'll see what they're like when they're avoiding. You'll see how they behave when they're upset, when they're happy. You'll get to see the full range. But a lot of times we ignore a lot of what we see because we're only looking at what we like at a certain period of time, or we're only looking for red flags. So if we're trying our best to learn the whole person, I think that's a more efficient way for us to start going through the process of dating better and learning if we should be with this person or if we shouldn't. When it comes to what was my next part about that? When it comes, say it again.
Healthy relationships.
Oh yeah, so it's kind of weird, but when I think about healthy relationships, I think about it in terms of like marriage and things like that. I feel like the happiest marriage is the people that don't focus on marriage. And I say that because I don't want my life's mission to be pleasing my significant other, because then that's a very selfish living life for the both of you. I feel like when you're coming together, there should be, and I'm very spiritual with it, I believe God gave me one specific thing to do in life, one purpose, and that becomes the family purpose. We become one. So the thing that God put us here to do, the focus is doing that. And when it comes to the relationship and keeping the marriage strong, I focus on myself and a set of behaviors. So I focus on love. I focus on grace, forgiveness, humility, endurance. And how do those things play out? How do I interpret them? How does my wife interpret them? And how does it play out in a day-to-day, in reality? So that way she knows, if I say something and it ends up hurting her, she at least knows that it's not coming from a place where I'm trying to be malicious. And as long as she knows that, she's not going to question my integrity or my character. And that gives me the opportunity to go back and say, I'm sorry for offending you. So when we just focus on those just core tenets and what it looks like, and it's very important, the normal term used now is like love languages, understanding how a person views a specific trait or a specific action, how you view it and how I view it, and understanding how those two things kind of work together. I think that leads to just a whole lot more happiness and a sense of purpose in life.
That was so good.
Good, yeah. I like you, Nelson. And I feel like you're a great husband and a great father.
I hope so.
That did remind me of something really quick, that sometimes like you're going to meet someone who, they say the 80-20, like there's going to be 20% of them that is not your favorite probably, but which is for all people. But for example, someone that I know, her husband is not very deep, not very emotional, which I would argue is from his upbringing. But it really bugged him, and she would go through, different things to try to, I guess, connect with him on a deeper way. But that just isn't, he may get there eventually. I'm not sure. It's up to him. But it's like, don't do you want to force him to be someone that he's not? Or do you want to accept and maybe work on the things that he's willing to? And I can tell you this, it's like he's not going to feel any more comfortable opening up when you're forcing him, trying to like, you know, almost coerce him in a way. So that's something too. It's like, would you rather be with someone that doesn't have to change because you've acknowledged that and you've accepted that, because otherwise you're forcing them to change, and that's no good either, you know? So
That's a great point, because I've had a lot of relationships that I've seen people in, where if it's a man to a woman, like, or a woman to a man, where the woman will come in and she wants to turn her husband into more of a direct person, wants them to claims they want them to be the head of the house, the man of the house. They want to be able to trust them with the bills, trust them to be able to take care of things when she needs it done, not realizing that she grew up as more of the dominant woman. She grew up in a single parent household. Mom did everything. So she's used to taking the initiative herself and doing all these things. And as a result, ends up marrying a man that also from a single parent household, also had a mom that was doing everything. So was used to that. The woman takes control. I'm in the back seat supporting. So one of the important things she had to end up realizing is, if you two want to go into counseling together and you want to change him into this more direct head of the house, take control type of person, then there's a strong chance that at the conclusion of counseling, you're going to get divorced, because he is no longer going to be that same person. And he's going to resent you for not allowing him now to be the man. And it's just going to cause a lot of issues. So you'll get the thing that you want, but you won't be able to hold on to it, because now he's not the person that you married.
And sometimes her dropping into the femininity, but honestly, this was me. I came off as like independent-ish. So he felt like that's what I wanted. I didn't need him, but we talked about it. You know, thank goodness for some of these channels and Kevin Samuels. When I started to back up and be aware of this, then that allowed him to step into the role that I think most men are supposed to. So that's good. That's good, Nelson.
It is. Do you do premarital counseling, Nelson?
Yes.
Okay. Me and JR are gonna call you.
Do you do it through Zoom? I mean, I'm technically married, but we still have whole ceremony stuff. So
yes, I do virtual also. Yes.
Yeah.
Now, is it true that you're what?
I mean, you just subtly said something. I mean,
I thought everybody knew. It's kind of a thing. Oh no, I'm sorry.
We picked up on the context clues like in another stream, and I was like, oh, okay, that's what's going on. But
wait, do you want to say it or no?
I don't care. He actually flew home to ask, because my father passed away. He flew home with me to ask my mother for her blessing, and he asked my godfather for like permission. So yeah, he like did it the old school way.
Yeah, okay. I'm trying to, like, because I love in relationship, marriage. So okay, congratulations. I didn't know this. Did other people know this?
That
I saw an Instagram video.
That we're together?
No, that like, because this is in the works, marriage. But I figured that was because I know I've heard you, and I know yeah. Oh, I love that. I love it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Seriously, and that's amazing. That's a beautiful touch too, with you know your father, unfortunately, you know. So that's
my godparents actually cried. They were sitting there and they were just like, we can't believe you flew all the way here just to do this, because it's very old school. Most people don't do it anymore. But I was like, you would have asked my dad. So since he's not here, he was like, well, can I ask your godfather? So. And he was like, I'd be honored. Yeah, I will definitely meet with him. And they all cried talking about my dad. I was just telling Leilani about this. Yeah, they all cried. And you were talking about my dad.
Good job, JR. Oh my gosh, so sweet. I'm so happy. Okay, sorry to derail, but
sorry. I mean, I thought My bad. My apologies. I did.
I'm bad about social media, so I probably just missed it or something. I don't know. Who knows?
My apologies. Did you want to chime in on the last topic, Leilani? Did you hear the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I heard it. Yeah, and everyone gave really great insight about their perspectives on having a healthy relationship. I wanted to comment on Nelson's comments. I love how you were sharing about the holistic. I think a lot of times people don't look at ourselves as a whole being. We are a spirit, we have emotions, and we live in a body, and they're all connected. And so then when you have emotional needs that aren't met, and some physical needs not met, and they're put in with the wrong people, with the wrong timing of things, it is it causes a lot of problems, bad soul ties and other things that it just gets very messy. I find a lot of people when they are if they themselves are unhealthy, and then they're around other unhealthy people that have other unmet needs, then everyone else starts being in a mess. And I find a lot of people, when they want to, it's amazing how our mind, there's a lot of power behind our will. God can't control that. Even to God doesn't control our will. We still have the free will to choose. Do we want to be healthy, or do we want to be unhealthy? Do we want to be whole? And if we choose to be whole, then that affects who we attract. 5 people you hang out with, you become. And I know you mentioned, I have coaches in my life, and the coaches that I get mentored by as well. They're healthy people, and because I didn't get that healthiness from some things that were dysfunctional in my family, or there were other things. So I think there's a place where if I'm choosing to be whole, and that's a place I can control, and other people that make the same decisions do the same thing, there is a place where you can have a healthier community where everyone is very mindful, because I know Kelly was mentioning about the self-awareness, the importance of that. And I is it I know I'm seeing Lady Mark, is that what your
T is fine, don't worry about it.
T? Okay. I like your screen name too. But you've provided so much insight of your journey, as well as trying to identify the boundaries, and with what's healthy and normal, and what's not healthy and normal. And then Nelson was mentioning about the same thing with observing how people respond, where people are at with how they cope and how they respond to situations with people. But it's also in a reflection of what's going on in the person. And then the other thing too was identity. I find that it's funny. I just did a training on this with my staff. We're doing a series on healthy and unhealthy people. And John Maxwell has a really good chart distinguishing between the two. But what's great about healthy people is that they do take responsibility of what's going on in them, and as opposed to an abuser, right, who isn't healthy. Because an abuser isn't healthy. And some people will say, hey, well, this person's a great person, but there's situations that are abusive, that now somebody who's really humble and they know themselves really well, and they're very clear about healthy boundaries. Sure, we could do that. So I was just saying is that, boundaries and identity are very, very important for healthy relationships. When you have somebody that is like, well, they don't have a good sense of identity, like Nelson was talking about personality disorders, people who have them, they're not good about boundaries most of the time. Like I find that they have to learn that because for people with personality disorders, it's that you can't really have meds to treat that. It's but they could do psychotherapy to work through knowing who they are and kind of grounding that. People who don't have personality disorder, they just are people that maybe don't know who they are. And I'll tell that, like when I worked with the adolescents, I love doing collages with them. And basically the collages were like, hey, create a collage about you. And so that is that age development where it's identity versus role confusion. And of course, they have hormones and they have other things when you have abuse in there. So those kids are trying to find out who they are, but then they don't really know what healthy boundaries are as well. And so as they got more in touch with who they are, and you could see in the collages, it's really interesting to see, oh, what do you like? What do you don't like? Why did you pick this picture? And what's happening is their thoughts and feelings are getting validated. Someone who is going to treat them in a healthy and have a healthy relationship, they're going to say, oh, well, I noticed that you like this, you don't like this. Well, I that's great. They validate that. They don't say, hey, I know those things aren't important. And so you need to do X, Y, and Z to make me happy. So that's an unhealthy relationship. So I just really see that healthy relationships, it's going to be how they're positioning themselves with identity, boundaries, and as well as the the mindset of within a community, how they're being influenced to um be programmed. Like everyone today has either had some kind of abuse or exposure to it or something. And what's great is that everybody made a choice to have a healthy relationship. Now on the spiritual side of things, which I'm a strong believer about, everything happens first in the spirit before the natural, like your dad would say, Shayna, to me. Is that uh, I had a problem growing up where everybody would say, why do you have all these needy guys after you? But you're not really into them. Why are they after you? And I said, well, I believe they're just after me because probably Jesus, because I don't ever, and I made a decision about this. I saw a lot of friends that were putting all their emotions and desires in the wrong places, and then they would get in trouble. Like either they just get messy with things that they wish they never did. And what I love about God is that if like for how things got healthy when I didn't know what was healthy at the time, uh, is that when I knew who I was in God, it was like, you know, I just saw that it, God showed me things that the truth sets you free. So if my security and my needs are all in God first before putting it in people and things, right? There's a security and a peace there that man can't. Like, my mom would say, well, one day, if when you get married, if your husband dies, like, how are you going to take care of yourself? How are you going to do, which is some questions to ask, but then I thought, well, but if my security is only in a marriage, or my security is only in things that are temporary, well, that is I'm just gonna have a crash. I mean, it's. But if my identity is in God alone, who is perfect and who is good and who's stable and who's consistent, then I know that my health and identity of how I see myself, I'll see myself the way God sees it, and then whoever I would marry, uh, and would have the same sense. So that's where Julius, when God brought Julius into my life, because we both weren't needy people to each other. You know what I mean? It was like, we actually were um, very, we were more focused about taking ownership of what we needed to take care of ourselves, and we both weren't taking from each other. I think sometimes when it feels like it's not right, it's like, okay, it's a one-sided relationship. If somebody keep taking and taking and abusing and not taking for granted those things, and even after getting married, because I know some of you married here, and Shayna was gonna get married soon. So, but I believe even with my husband, I on a daily basis I have to identify my boundaries with him. I'll say, yeah, when you say that I I really felt hurt, but I don't use it to make him feel bad or condemned. It's just, here's my boundary. I know you didn't mean anything by it, and then guess what? It just gets worked out, and it gets better and better. So I think that there's an ongoing process too of keeping it healthy, um, as well. And there's when we're communicating who we are to the other person or somebody else, and the boundaries. Um, there is there's a flow that honors each other, so
And they
that's what
respect
I
your boundaries when they
see
really
that.
love you.
That's good. Just like
Yeah.
a body, things take work anyway to remain healthy. You're not just born from infancy to being an elderly person with just given health. Like, it takes work. So I think that was great. I loved what you added.
That was excellent. Thank you so much. I'll say for me, a healthy relationship is someone I feel safe with, because I always think, when I think about a man, I feel like, does he make me feel the way my father made me feel? Like, I remember, no matter what, wherever we were going, where we were, he was always going to make sure I was okay, whether that was spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, in any way. He was going to cover me. And I always look for that feeling. Like, do I feel that way when I'm with you? And if I do, okay, it can work. I want to feel safe. So that's most important to me.
Almost like trust in a way, like on all those different levels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is. But I do appreciate everyone joining. Does anyone else have any final comments they wanted to add? Everything has been so amazing and so great, and it was a really powerful discussion. So I hope it helped. I hope it helped a lot of people. Did anyone else want to?
I was going to say, does Nelson or Leilani or even Kelly, I don't know if there's any like first resources or steps that they should take, maybe if anyone is like experiencing possibly abuse or something.
I will let the counselors take this one. And there's like a hotline, right?
Yeah, I'm like, I always try to like separate, like you say it, whatever, you think it.
Recommendations for someone that's in an abusive relationship.
Or have dealt with abuse, maybe.
Yeah, there is an abuse hotline, and it varies by the state you're in. So for most people, I can't comment on where everybody's at, but I would just start by a simple Google search of National Abuse Hotline by your state, and something should come up. Or if you want to find, if you directly want to find a therapist, then psychologytoday.com is a great one. But if you're inside of an abusive relationship, the idea, you don't want to go directly to therapy with your abuser. You don't start therapy there. The first thing is your safety. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Start with the National Abuse Hotlines to be able to help guide you to what's going to get you physically safe, get you mentally safe, and then you can start working on rebuilding there. But yeah.
Okay. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
there and within the hotline, there are recommendations to places in that area. The like for women who are battered, they have shelters, but a lot of times you can't. It doesn't say battered women's shelter in exact. They're hidden. But when you're into like a sometimes it's a therapist network that they have within the hotline or something like that. They will direct it. I remember when I worked at the Batters Women's Shelter, they we were not allowed to say where we worked. We were not allowed to, and a lot of the women changed their names because they did not want the abuser to find them. So when people would approach us and say, "Hey, where can I go?" and I have to ask, like, "Well, what was the abuse that you're going through?" So if it was, um, you know, like there's this girl, and there was a case where this girl, she was sexually abused by this guy who he did it to several women, and he ended up in jail. He got out of jail, but she changed her name. She did not ever want him to find her. And she had to go through therapy, but she didn't go to a shelter. She didn't I mean, she had a good family that supported her. So her route was to go through a therapist and get help. But then I have women that, they have kids and everything, and they didn't know where to go. And so the network that I was a therapist in, they contacted us and told us that you're going to have like these women, and we need you. But when they go to the shelter, they're not even there that long. They usually are there for they try to help them get strong enough to feel safe, and then they'll just redirect them somewhere else. So that's kind of like my observation with resourcing with the networks, because a lot of people they and some of them go to the church, but like a lot of times we try to separate. But then you have if the abuser is willing to get help, they they have help for that too.
I was thinking too, maybe like primary care, but obviously depending on how they feel talking about it, if they have insurance, things like that, because sometimes that's how people find a therapist anyway, but obviously it just depends on people's situation.
Yeah. Social workers and case managers, depending on, how the organization set up, like they usually have the resource to direct them. Like
there's a lot out there too. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, like I was a social worker and I would just put the resources down, but the case managers were the ones to set it up for them. Like where I worked at. Yeah, they in the city. Each city has their own setup.
Leilani, can you just speak to, because I know I have a friend, she's probably watching right now. She was in 2 abusive relationships, and she said a lot of times the men would say, there's nothing out there for you. You're never going to find a better man than me. There's never going to be a guy who's going to treat you better than I do. And they almost instill this fear, like there's nothing out there for them if they leave. So can you just speak to that? Because I know that after she left the first guy, she ended up with another abuser. And when she left him, she met her husband, who she's been married to for over 20 years, and they're happily married, and he's a great guy. So like, I know it's a fear factor to step out of that, but there is a life outside of that is better. So I want people to know that they're watching if they feel like they're stuck.
Yeah. So my husband says the grass is greener on the other side. He always says that because I'm his second marriage. His first wife was not a really healthy relationship. And so well, and we'd be married like 16, 17 years this year. I can't believe it, but I mean, I can, but it's great. It gets better when it's, you work through it and everything, and it's great. But for those women who or men who need to see that hope, when they make the decision to close a door, and I'm talking about the door to, oh, I don't want to live this abuse cycle anymore. I know that there's more for me. Some people get really tired of it. Like they have to get tired of it. Oh, I'm tired of being a victim, or I'm tired of being a punching bag for, I mean, it's abuse is some people look at it as a normal lifestyle for them. Some women don't see their worth, men don't see their worth, they want to, but when they're saying, hey, like I will just tell you, just recently, it's funny when people know you have a counseling background. It's funny, they'll ask me a question and I said, well, are you ready to hear what I have to say? Because I'm not going to say things or sugarcoat things. And there was a lady, I mean, hey, truth sets you free. It's like, okay, what decision do you want to make? And there was a lady, it's sad. She had, this is, somebody that that I had worked with, that she has a few kids and her husband had died, and he was a substance abuser, so she was left with these kids, but she said, hey, I she had friends and very very sound healthy people that told her, um, because she was, after her husband died, she decided she wanted to date these guys that were abusers, and I've seen this with a lot, not only her, other women that have done this, where they're so broken that they just wanted to be with somebody so quickly, or they didn't have the father need, and so whatever there's unmet needs were, well, she ended up being with this abuser, and it was so scary for her to not be to make a decision. Well, if I've got kids and they got needs, and here I am with this abuser, and he's taking care of me, and people told her that if she left him, this is the abuser's family, and her husband's family telling her, don't leave this guy, and she was haunted by thinking, if I keep staying here with him, I'd get needs met, but I don't feel good about myself, that it looks like it's damaging to the kids, and so I have to move my kid. Where am I going to go? Where am I going to take my kids? And so we just said to her, well, what do you want? Do you want freedom? Or if you feel like if you stay with this abuser, that you feel like this is all there is for you? Or do you feel like if you close this door and you cut this off? I told her, you got to cut the soul tie off. You have to not be part of this cycle with him, or you move on, because she knew that he wasn't going to change. So she said, you know what? She just got tired of being in that cycle, and she thought of her kids, and she just made her mind up, and so she just left everybody with her kids and relocated completely to another location, and said, hey, I don't want to live this anymore, and I think there's people that just have to make their mind up, where they have to really decide what lifestyle do they want, and even if it they have to just cut ties off with people that they shouldn't be, because there's a point where you huh
I said, is she happy now?
hello
Can you hear me?
She is, like, Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah. She's so much happier now. She kept hugging me and said, oh, I don't know. I'm just so glad that I had to go to an unfamiliar environment in order to receive freedom. You know, some people they're used. She goes, look, she said, I am so used to being with a man my whole life. I have never known what it's like to do that. And she said, I really want to see what it's like where I can have those needs met and God first. Um, and her kids are thriving, and she said, I'm able to do things that for myself that I never knew I could do. So I think there's where the loss of all the dysfunction to gain healthiness, for her, um, and freedom. Some people don't know until they step out of that comfort zone. Sometimes it's like almost like abuse to them is comfortable. It because they're so used to it.
It's like you're going to be uncomfortable either way.
But
So would you rather be uncomfortable, and not to sugarcoat it, of course, but like they're already experiencing tons of negativity here, and they're going to experience that negative, just from going to an unfamiliar place, whatever that's going to require for her. I don't know exactly what her situation was, but on the other side, what do you get? Versus if you stay with him, there's really not going to be another side.
Right. You already
Besides
know.
the comfort of getting your needs met, which isn't very comfortable. Yeah. That's important.
yeah, it takes a step of courage, I think. But she saw that, hey, I have to love who I am and my children enough that how we that she saw how valuable she was to not be mistreated, and her worth, that she said, I don't want my kids to live like this. Because there was, I believe, when this is just, when things are out of kingdom order of things, like, I'm talking about when it's not the way God made it to be, then things are always off. They're not blessed. There's just a lot of that. God doesn't bless sin. So there's just all these, there's the whole spiritual side of how I see where God dysfunction comes in. I mean, look, Cain and Abel, like, there was abuse there. I mean, in the Bible, you just see abuse where it started from when, even when Adam and Eve decided to choose to sin, it just, there's this side of us that when we don't want to surrender it to a place where we want better, best, or whatever, there's a place we're going to get what we sow. We reap what we sow. So when people want to be free from living a lifestyle that's keeping in bondage, or I have people that'll say this to me. They'll say, hey, do you know a Christian therapist? And I was like, I do. Well, they said, well, do you what can you give me a contact area? And I know different therapists that I can recommend for certain things. And they said, well, what's the difference between a coach and a therapist? And I said, well, um, how fast do you want to be free? Do you want to go to a therapist and just work through whatever you need to work through? Or do you want to go to a coach and remove obstacles that are in the way and you want to move forward? How bad do you want freedom? And this one girl said, I have so many panic attacks. I just do anything to get rid of it. So she wanted freedom, and she was a single mom that was in an abusive situation. And I sent her to a healing and deliverance minister who also coaches. She went to 2 sessions, and then she has not ever had to deal with that again. And from that time on, you know, um, accomplished all her goals and more as a single mom. 2 masters, raised her kids and everything without a man, like a single mom. Like, worked on healing, wholeness, worked through father wounds, I mean, she was unstoppable to work through everything, but she wanted it so bad. She said, I hate seeing all the stuff in my family, and I don't ever want my kids or myself to ever walk with the same dysfunction. I want freedom, because she was more attracted to freedom than she was to bondage.
I
I
love
think
that.
there's a place people choose.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry that I kept you guys so long. I know we
That's
usually go 2 hours, and I'm like, oh, it's almost 3 hours. So thank you so much.
We
And
all love this, right? Look who's left. Well, not that the others don't, but love this stuff. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. Absolutely. And thank you all for joining. And thank you for the people who stuck with us till the end and watched and joined the show. I don't know what next week's topic is, but I'll definitely let you guys know sooner rather than later. But thank you so much, Nelson, Coach K, and Leilani. And good luck on becoming a doctor.
Yeah,
Good luck with that.
Okay.
And thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Absolutely. You
Thank
guys
you.
are all amazing. You gave excellent sound advice. I hope it helped a lot of people. So
Yes.
Thanks for having us.
Great.
thank you. Absolutely. Have a good night.
All right, take care.
All right. I got to figure this out without JL.